Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We will be reading again Managing Oneself by Peter F. Drucker. Today's part and section, we will be reading What Are My Values? What are my values? To be able to manage yourself, you finally have to ask, what are my values? This is not a question of ethics. With respect to ethics, the rules are the same for everybody. And the test is a simple one. I call it the mirror test. In the early years of this century, the most highly respected diplomat of all the great powers was the German ambassador in London. He was clearly destined for great things, to become his country's foreign minister, at least, if not its federal chancellor. Yet in 1906, he abruptly resigned rather than preside over a dinner given by the diplomatic corps for Edward VI. The king was a notorious womanizer and made it clear what kind of dinner he wanted. The ambassador is reported to have said, "I refuse to see a pimp in the mirror in the morning when I shave." That is the mirror test. Ethics requires that you ask yourself, what kind of a person do I want to see in the mirror in the morning? What is ethical behavior in one kind of organization or situation is ethical behavior in another. But ethics is only part of a value system, especially for an organization's value system. To work in an organization whose value system is unacceptable or incompatible with one's own condemns a person both to frustration and to non-performance. Consider the experience of a highly successful human resources executive whose company was acquired by a big organization. After the acquisition, she was promoted to do the kind of work she did best, which included selecting people for important positions. The executive deeply believed that a company should hire people for such positions from the outside only after exhausting all the inside possibilities. But her new company believed in first looking outside to bring in fresh blood. There is something to be said for both approaches. In my experience, the proper one is to do some of both. They are, however, fundamentally incompatible, not as policies, but as values. They bespeak different views of the relationship between organizations and people, different views of the responsibility of an organization to its people and their development, and different views of a person's most important contribution to an enterprise. After several years of frustration, the executive quit at considerable financial loss. Her values and the values of the organization simply were not compatible. Similarly, whether a pharmaceutical company tries to obtain results by making constant small improvements or by achieving occasionally highly expensive and risky breakthroughs, it is not primarily an economic question. The results of either strategy may be pretty much the same. At bottom, there is a conflict between a value system that sees the company's contribution in terms of helping physicians do better what they already do, and a value system that is oriented toward making scientific discoveries. Whether a business should be run for short-term results or with a focus on the long term is likewise a question of values. Financial analysts believe that businesses can be run for both simultaneously. Successful business people know better. To be sure, every company has to produce short-term results, but in any conflict between short-term results and long-term growth, each company will determine its own priority. It's not primarily a disagreement about economics. It is fundamentally a value conflict regarding the function of a business and the responsibility of management. Value conflicts are not limited to business organizations. Value conflicts are not limited to business organizations. One of the fastest growing pastoral churches in the United States measures success by the number of new parishioners. Its leadership believes that what matters is how many newcomers join the congregation. The good Lord will then minister to the spiritual needs, or at least to the needs of a sufficient percentage. Other pastoral evangelical church believes that what matters is people's spiritual growth. The church eases out newcomers who join but do not enter into its spiritual life. Again, this is not a matter of numbers. At first glance, it appears that the second church grows more slowly, but it remains a fair larger portion of newcomers than the first one does. Its growth, in other words, is more solid. This is also not a theological problem, or only secondarily so. It is a problem about values. In a public debate, one pastor argued, "Unless you first come to church, you will never find the gate to the kingdom of heaven." "No," answered the other, "until you first look for the gate to the kingdom of heaven, you don't belong in church." Organizations, like people, have values. To be effective in an organization, a person's values must be compatible with the organization's values. They do not need to be the same, but they must be close enough to coexist. Otherwise, the person will not only be frustrated, but also will not produce results. A person's strengths and the way that person performs rarely conflict. The two are complementary, but there is sometimes a conflict between a person's values and his or her strengths. What one does well, even very well and successfully, may not fit with one's value system. In that case, the work may not appear to be worth devoting one's life to, or even a substantial portion thereof. If I may, allow me to interject a personal note. Many years ago, I had to decide between my values and what I was doing successfully. I was doing very well as a young investment banker in London in the mid-1930s. And the work clearly fit my strengths. Yet, I did not see myself making a contribution as an asset manager. People, I realized, were what I valued, and I saw no point in being the richest man in the cemetery. I had no money and no other job prospects. Despite the continuing depression, I quit, and it was the right thing to do. Values, in other words, are and should be the ultimate test. So if we go back to the beginning of this part of the book, the mirror test really puts you to the test of who you are going to work for, or who you idolize per se, who's going to be your executive or CEO, and do you really want to be like that person? Do you really want to be like this executive? Do you really want to be like this CEO? And the thing that comes up is their character, their values. I like that last sentence. Values, in other words, are and should be the ultimate test. And when you really break it down, you guys, that's it. You know, what are your own values, and do they line up with the company or the CEO's values that you're going to be working for? And do you think that the job or the work is going to be worth it? Do you think that this occupation is going to benefit you morally in the long run? And much like companies or organizations, they're a lot like your peers or your friends. And just to give you an example of a real life experience, it's like, what do my friends' values pertain to in life? What are they really going after, and what do they believe in? See, I truly believe that men need to live by a code, and what is in that code, and if they are following that code. Which backs it up to say, you know, what are your values? And that's the question I want to end with is, what are your values, and do they line up with the business, the organization, or just the job that you work with? Do they line up with the peers that you have in your life, the friends that you have in your life? And really, it goes back to that age-old saying, you're going to end up being just like the 5 people that you hang out with on a regular basis. It's just something to keep in mind, you guys. But again, as for this part of the book, what are your values? And what do you live by? All right, you guys, go ahead, leave me a comment. Let's discuss it in the comment section of this video. And I will see you guys in the next one.